So welcome to What's Arising. Once again, before I start, I'll ring my bowl 3 times, inviting you into presence, into connection with yourself, with others, humanity, with all that is. 3 times, and then I'll begin the podcast, which will be about shadow. Thank you for bearing with me in ringing my bowl. I do that maybe more for myself than you. I hope you like that. If not, give me some feedback on the bowl, or whether you'd like me to just jump right into my podcast. So this podcast will focus on shadow work and why shadow integration is essential if we are going to effectively navigate and survive the difficult times arising in our world. The times ahead of us represent an opportunity for a great leap in the human condition. I feel that within all the human insanity that is arising in the world, there is a tremendous potential to let go of what no longer serves us and step into a new world that works for all. Life, I feel, is inviting us to move towards co-creating a lasting peace on earth. But there is work to do. There are always choices to make. Each of us is at a crossroads. Do we intensify suffering by falling into a collective dark night of the soul? Or do we ignite the brilliant light that lies within each of us, enveloping our world with our love? We each have the opportunity to turn up our light. What is the crossroads that you find yourself at? What is the direction your soul is calling you to take? At the core of this great shift that humanity is going through is a shift in our relationship with our shadows. You probably think of shadow as our dark side or our darker nature. But I prefer to define shadow as only a blocking of our light and the mind's separation of self. Hidden within our shadows lie the greatest of gifts when we turn the light of truth and wholeness on them. Shadow work is the alchemy of transforming perceived lead into authentic gold. It is the transformation of hate and fear into unconditional love. When we forgive and surrender all the wars within us, then all the outer conflicts and wars naturally cease. All conflicts and wars in our world are in truth a reflection of an unconscious conflict and war with our shadow. Just as we cannot catch or forever remove the shadow cast by our physical body. We cannot remove or destroy our inner shadows because they don't actually exist, except as an illusion of the mind. Waging war with our shadows is therefore futile. As a war, there is no winning, ever. And if all our outer conflict and war is based on a futile war with the inner shadow, then it follows that the outer wars are also futile dramas. They don't need to be. We can have peace. If an outer war appears to be one, a new one will eventually arise once again from the shadows, unless those shadows are resolved in the light. To find lasting peace, we must go into the depth of the shadows to correct misunderstandings in the mind. We must correct and heal at the core. Shadow is at the core of every experience we hate or can't stand in the world. They are at the core of what triggers us emotionally. They are the energies behind the dramas we create. Shadow lurks at the core of conflict, war, racism, corruption, greed, dishonesty, judgment, censorship, cancel culture, woke, blame, shame, fear, anxiety, and depression. You'll find shadow everywhere in what we don't like about our world. Shadow is at the core of what keeps us stuck, feeling lost, alone, or not seen. Shadow can also show up in our inability to embrace our brilliance and inherent goodness, those blocks to shining the light of our soul. Shifting shadow, therefore, will shift your life. Shifting shadow will also shift our world. Learning how to dance with and in the shadows rather than going to war against them or avoiding them is the secret to dancing the greatest dance of your life. Let's take a look at this phenomena of inner shadow using the physical world shadows as a metaphor. The physical shadow only exists where there is light shining and where that light is blocked by some material object. The physical shadow then is connected to and one with the object and the light. The shadow cannot exist without the light and the light being blocked by an object. It is only in complete darkness or full light without any form blocking it that no shadow is cast. The polarity of dark and light, on or off, or positive and negative charge, is foundational to this experience we call reality or life. Without both sides, the world as we know it would disappear. We need on and off to have this experience. We need black and white. Our sense organs only pick up on these on or off, light or dark signals. Just like a digital computer is made up of zeros and ones, we create our outer reality by receiving on and off signals and interpreting these signals with our conditioned mind. The brain and mind filter, interpret, and organize the on-off signals to make meaning and form a response to the stimuli. Shadow is perceived by the mind as real, but has no independent reality apart from the light, the observer, and the object. Even the object is just a collection of zeros and ones, ons and offs, interpreted by the mind, so one could question its reality too. The object, shadow, and background space, in a sense, is just a projection on the screen of the mind. Similar to the physical shadow, the existence of our psychological shadow is dependent on the light of our awareness and consciousness. In this case, our mind also creates psychological shadow by blocking or filtering the full light of consciousness. This is done through beliefs. Beliefs create filters on our perception of both outer and inner realities. Beliefs often organize our world into concepts like good and bad. If there was no belief, there would be no psychological shadow and no conflict. There would be no good and no bad, just pure experience. Do you think an animal looks at the world and says, that's good and that's bad? It just is. In the unfiltered light of consciousness, or the dark void of nothingness, no shadow can exist. In the void, duality and reality as we know it would also cease. As a reflection exercise, who would you be if rather than trying to change your limiting beliefs, you surrendered or let go of all beliefs, opening your mind and heart to receiving life in its freshness? What would life be like in the embrace of innocence, leaping and dancing into the infinitely creative unknown? The good news is that your beliefs and emotions are completely within your control. You can dissolve them. This is part of the process of shadow integration work. To continue, the reality of being in the human experience is one of experiencing ons and offs. You can't have one side of the coin without the other. You cannot experience on if there was no off. We can only know light through the experience of dark. The same with hot and cold, up and down, black and white, and even life and death. They are one of the same experience. They are one. They are united and cannot be separated. Take one away, and the other cannot exist. So why do we try to take one side of our experience away? Right and left, up and down. In this human experience, could we know love without having the opposing hate or fear? Could we know trust without betrayal? Could we have we's without the me's? Could we cherish life in the absence of death? I wonder. In life, then, our experience of one thing can only exist in relationship to another. They are mutually interdependent. You cannot have one side without the other. Our life experience depends on these polarities. Everything exists in the relationship of ons and offs. This relationship of on and off is a unified field that allows us to experience ourselves in form. It is a whole. It gives us our aliveness and our life. So what is psychological shadow? Shadow arises when our minds attempt to reject, get rid of, or suppress one side of a polarity, classifying one side as good and the other as bad, one as lovable and the other as unlovable. This is like trying to get rid of one side of a coin without destroying the side you want. It can't be done. It's a futile war. In fact, the greater your emotional charge against the other side of a polarity, the bigger, more powerful that other side seems to become. As discussed in a previous podcast about stilling the wave, you cannot have one side of a wave without the other. The higher the peak, the deeper the trough. The peak and the trough will always be in balance. The dark and the light will always stay in balance. The yin and the yang, as in Buddhist symbolism, will also stay in balance. That's the nature of our reality. The harder you fight to try to get rid of the shadow, such as the shadow of corruption, dishonesty, fakes, victims, or judgments, the more energy you are adding into creating them. You cannot get rid of them by ignoring them either. This is the nature of shadow, the psychological shadow. The shadow's existence and strength is dependent on the belief and the emotional energy we project into it. It is only in forgiveness and surrender that the wave can still and the shadow subside and dissolve. Shadow is dissolved by surrendering the belief and the emotional charge. The integration happens when you move towards the shadow with acceptance and love, rather than trying to escape from it or destroy it. Humanity is experiencing a gigantic and dangerous storm. The storm contains drug abuse, crime, corruption, war, anxiety, depression, polarization, censorship, authoritarianism, social unrest, fake news, and so many other problems that are only growing. However, these are just the outward symptoms of the underlying disease. Our collective shadow is the energy that is driving the storm, and the resulting waves are getting strong enough to drive us to our knees. And that's the point. This is one of the critical crossroads we are approaching. If we do not go to our knees and surrender the war with our shadow, suffering will only get worse. The waves will continue to get even more dangerous. By choosing to surrender, accept, and integrate our shadows, rather than waging a war against them like we've always done, we can take a great leap into a new humanity and a new earth. Only in surrender can the battle with evil be complete. In surrender, the ocean is as calm and still as glass. It is the calm after the storm. It is our bliss. I hope this podcast has given you insight into the shadow realm and why shadow work is so essential to our awakening. Because it is so important, these podcasts will continue to focus on shadow integration work. Shadow is a huge part of the human experience, and it's difficult to see. It is hidden in plain sight. We need to be able to recognize the shadows if we want to do the work required to stop feeding that storm. So in future podcasts, I intend to point out some of the common shadows that I see arising in our collective narrative, in the hope that it may give you some clues into the shadows you are feeding, so that you may still your wave and rest in the pure joy of love and life. And if you're ready and motivated to discover and integrate the shadows making waves in your life, please reach out to me for a free discovery session or sign up for one of my shadow workshops. I'd love to assist you in calming the storms arising in your life. In calming your own waves, it'll help you navigate this collective storm we are facing and assist humanity in making this great leap into the calm beyond the storm.